Story 1. I don't talk about this much. It's been many years since it happened. This experience haunts my dreams. I was incarcerated in county jail for a year. My time spent was in lockdown. I could never pay attention to the exact time of day/night since the block clock was never maintained. I do know it was the quiet hours of the early morning before sunrise. Multiple days I would see shadows and reflections through my window into the great room. I would regularly see silhouettes walk past my window, and I would often dismiss them as guards taking rounds checking on us inmates to ensure we were still present. There would be times, however, that my curiosity would get piqued when I would see a passing shadow, but never heard any doors open or close from the guards in the bullpen. I would climb out of my bunk and try to look left and right out of my door's window, but never saw a guard returning to his post. After weeks of seeing the same phenomenon, I finally saw something that sent shivers down my spine. One night while reading a book, I couldn't shake this feeling of being watched. I was used to the passing shadows by this point, but as I mentioned, they were always passing. This was something else. I don't remember ever seeing it appear or leave. It was as I can only describe as omnipresent. It felt as though it had always been present. Just waiting. Watching. Only this time it allowed me to observe it. Almost like it materialized. There were no shapes, no discernible edges. Just a void. A black hole as deep as space itself. And in the middle were two piercing red eyes. I could never steel myself enough to make direct contact. I didn't need to know it was there. I could feel its gaze in my peripherals. I was prey and it had been stalking me, and both of us were just waiting for the other to make the first move. All I could do was to pretend I didn't notice it, hoping that it would lose interest. At some point, not knowing how much time had passed, I eventually fell asleep. It only appeared the one time. The only person I have shared that story with is my partner, but never in as much detail. I thank you all for taking the time to read this and creating a safe place where someone can feel comfortable sharing their deepest fears. Story 2. When I was about 12, my family moved into an old house that had been empty for years. The first night, I heard soft footsteps outside my bedroom door, but when I opened it, no one was there. Over the next few weeks, the footsteps became more frequent, always stopping just outside my door. One night, I woke up to the sound of whispering, low and unintelligible, coming from the corner of my room. When I turned on the light, I saw nothing, but the air felt heavy, like someone was watching me. The scariest moment came a few nights later. I woke up in the middle of the night, unable to move, with a crushing weight on my chest. In the darkness, I could just make out the silhouette of a figure standing at the foot of my bed. It was tall and shadowy, with no distinguishable features, just a dark presence. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. The figure slowly leaned closer, and as it did, the temperature in the room dropped. Just as I felt it was about to touch me, the figure vanished, and I could move again. I never saw the figure after that night, but the fear of waking up to that presence still haunts me. Even now, I can't sleep in total darkness. I always keep a light on, just in case. Story 3. When I was 7, my family, mom and 2 older brothers, 13 and 15, moved house. We moved to a street that was built on old tram tracks from around the 1900s. The line of terraced properties themselves were fairly new. When we moved in, they were only around 15 years old max. All of the properties have a rear garden that is divided by a meter-tall wooden fence. Each garden has a shared rear wall that is a 7-foot tall and made of concrete. This wall separates the properties from the grounds of the local park. This is all relevant, I promise. As a kid, I kept myself entertained. The age gap between my brothers and I at that age was enough to be left out of things, and my parents were recently divorced. I would make up games and act out imaginary scenes. It was not uncommon to find me playing by myself in the back garden. We had pet rabbits that lived in a hutch that was up against the back wall mentioned earlier. Being the curious child I was, I used to like to stand on the hutch and look over the wall into the park and people watch. I remember it being a warm night, and the sun was setting a bit later in the day. I don't remember the time exactly, but with the way the daylight plays in my memory, it was around 7 p.m. I was out in the garden, people watching from my rabbit hutch vantage point when I had the sudden urge to look over my right shoulder. With the way my house is laid out, the kitchen is at the rear of the house. If I were to enter the house, I'd open the door and walk through the kitchen. My neighbor's house, which would be on my right as I looked back, is a bit different. Their sitting room is at the rear instead. So, I look over my right shoulder and my neighbor's back door is open. There are no lights on, so it's dark in the sitting room and I can't make anything out, but I know they have a sofa facing out and it would be where I was looking. I see two red dots, spaced apart and not changing distance from one another, floating in the middle of this black room. I remember squinting, trying to figure out what I'm seeing. I shit you not, these two dots move in a smooth arc to the right and upwards, as if they were eyes on a face of someone standing up from the sofa. As they move, they seem to get a bit closer to the door and I can make out nothing except for a dark silhouette. I freak out and run back inside, all the way to the front of the house where our sitting room is located, to tell my mom. She assures me it's nothing and I head back outside. I climb back onto the rabbit hutch and immediately look behind me again. The figure with its red eyes is now standing in the doorway of their house, looking out into the garden. I nope once more back into the house and this time I do not go back outside. For years, I forgot about this experience, but I've always been afraid of the dark. I especially hate looking out of windows at night, particularly into the back garden. Something jogged my memory of it a few years ago and every time I talk about it, it makes me want to cry because it scared me so much. I still remember every damn detail of that evening and I wonder what it was I saw. My neighbors still live there and I'm too scared to ask them if they've experienced anything or if they have an explanation for what I saw. Story 4. I've had a few small paranormal things happen when I was around my little brother, who was always seeing paranormal stuff, but the biggest thing that happened that we both experienced together was one day in the summer we were sitting in the living room, and being young, dumb kids, we decided to play with our mom's Ouija board. Nothing happened with the board, but suddenly, in the kitchen, it sounded like all of the dishes had suddenly fallen onto the floor. There was super loud crashing and banging, and nobody in the kitchen at the time. So we immediately jumped up and went to see what happened, but when we got there, everything looked normal. Nothing was out of place. We ran into our mom's room to ask if she had heard the commotion, but she hadn't. We immediately put the board away and never touched it again. That isn't my scariest paranormal encounter. This happened when I was probably around 14 or 15, and I had just moved into a bedroom in the basement, for a little extra separation from a not-so-good home life. Evil step-parent. I had been in that room for a few weeks at this point with no issues. The room was a simple square, but one wall of the room was a really big closet. It had two sets of double doors to it, no walls or anything separating the inside, so you could walk all of the way through it. Anyway, there were a few days in a row where I would wake up in the middle of the night, like always within a few minutes of 3 a.m., think 2:56 a.m., 3:01 a.m., etc., with the feeling like I was being awoken from a really deep sleep. I could feel myself being pulled from my deep slumber, but could never place why. Every time when I woke up, the entire house would be completely, dead silent. Like I could hear my own breathing and heartbeat like it was super loud. So it wasn't a sound that woke me up, what was it? My dad wasn't trying to wake me, my cat was asleep by my feet. What woke me up? This happened a couple nights in a row, until the last night. Same thing happened, I felt myself being pulled awake by something, awoke to dead silence around 2:58 a.m., and I sat up. My closet door, the one closest to my bed, started rattling. I assumed it was my cat, who did try to get into the closet a lot, but he was curled up at my feet, but also staring right at the closet door. I stared back at the door in horror. It rattled a bit before slowly opening about 3 to 4 inches, then just stopped. I was frozen to my bed. I couldn't move. I just sat there, terrified of whatever could be behind those doors. After what felt like an eternity, my cat, who was curious, went to the door, sniffing, and stuck his face inside. He didn't seem alarmed, and nothing bad happened to him, so I took this chance to sprint to the light and switch it on as fast as possible. I stood at the door for too long before gathering my courage to investigate. I searched the closet, in my room, and there was no explanation. I didn't want to wake up my parent for this, since I had no proof, so I just went back to sleep eventually. And it never happened again. I slept peacefully in that room for years after that. Still the scariest thing that ever happened to me that I couldn't explain. Gets my heart pounding just thinking about it. Story 5. This happened a few years ago, but was recently telling my roommate about it, and decided to post it here. While I've never really been a skeptic, I never had an actual personal experience until this point. I could tell a dozen stories from that place, but hands down the scariest experience I've ever had. In 2021 I was working as a private investigator for a security firm, but would sometimes be called in to cover security guard posts. I was called in over a long holiday weekend during which a factory was going to be shut down. I covered night shifts, and during shutdown, everything in the building was powered off, lights, machines, everything save for things like security cameras, lights in the office, alarms, the boiler, and Wi-Fi. This was a huge factory. It took roughly an hour and a half to make one round, and the entire building was pitch black, so in order to do rounds we had mag lights, and the cell phone to scan barcodes near the doors to track our movements. We also had to write down the readings from several pressure valves on certain water risers. 2 of the risers were 10 feet apart, and behind 2 large pieces of machinery along a back wall. To get the readings, we couldn't hold both the mag light and the cell phone, so we had to use just the cell phone to navigate. My first round had gone fine, no issues, everything secure, all doors locked, everything accounted for. I had just started my second round, and was getting the measurements from the risers. I got the first reading, turned to my left and was getting ready to walk the 10 feet to the second, when a shadow appeared in front of me. It didn't really have a distinct shape, but was human height, and so black I could distinguish it from the already pitch black of the factory. It flew directly at me, passing through my chest. It was the most horrid, soul-deep ice-cold feeling I have ever experienced. I collapsed on the floor, and while I don't know how much time had passed, I managed to call my boss. Thankfully he came and found me, called EMS, and while he obviously thought I was nuts, this building had a reputation for paranormal activity and negative energy. It had ended the career of more than one guard, so he knew something happened. When EMS came, my vitals were all over the place. My heart rate was 180, while my blood pressure was only 74/40. I was in the hospital for a couple days dealing with tachycardia. While I doubt he ever fully believed me, my boss has seen me handle first response after a tornado, an active shooter, and a hostage situation with relative sanity intact. Even he admitted that whatever happened rattled me to my core. I don't know what it was, a demon, a reaper, or just one very pissed off spirit, but it was not friendly. To this day, just thinking about that experience gives me chills, makes me sick to my stomach, and puts me on edge. At 32 years old I still refuse to be in a pitch black room again because of it. Story 6. I wanted to share a strange experience I had as a kid that I've never been able to explain, and I'm curious to hear what you all think. Years ago, when I was a child, my parents and I were driving back from a friend's house late at night. We were on a forest road near my home city. It was around 2 a.m., pitch dark, and we were literally in the middle of nowhere, no houses, no signs of civilization. Out of nowhere, we saw something that still gives me chills to this day. There was a child, probably around 8 or 9 years old, standing next to some bushes by the side of the road, playing with a yo-yo. It was the strangest thing because there was absolutely no one else around, no buildings or lights, nothing that would explain why a kid would be there at that hour. My parents didn't stop, and we just drove past, but the image has stuck with me ever since. I've always wondered, was it a ghost? Was my tired mind playing tricks on me? Or was there something else going on? Has anyone else experienced something similar, or does anyone have any thoughts on what this could have been? Story 7. It was late at night. I was using my phone in the living room when my mom appeared from behind me. I was on the sofa and she stood behind it on my right side so I could see her with my peripheral vision. She said something pretty simple, "Go to bed." I said, "I'll go later." She responds, "No, you must go now." I respond, "Fine." Just a minute. The second whatever that thing was turned around to leave, I felt my blood go cold in my veins, chills down my spine and a horrible feeling of dread. My thoughts kept going, "That's not mom, that's not mom, that's not mom." So I immediately got up to catch it. It ran away, so I chased it down the corridor. It ran to my mother's room. I was right behind it, so I turned the lights on. My mom was asleep in her bed. The thing is, when she walks she makes a lot of sound. That thing made none. And her bed at that time was super creaky. There is no way she got in it without making any sounds. Anyway, when I turned the lights on, I saw my brother in the room. I asked him if he came to the living room. He said no. I asked him if mom got up and left the room. He said, "I've been watching her the whole time because I'm using her phone and don't want to get caught. She didn't even get up." So I was mortified, but that thing that took my mom's shape and voice was insisting I go to the bedroom, so I did. When I entered, I saw my sister on her bed. She was sitting up with her blanket around her. The first thing she told me was, "Thank God you came in here." This whole time I kept hearing knocking under both our beds, and it stopped the second you came into the room. I still can't tell what the hell that was. There was no gas leaks, and I wasn't sleepy because I had slept the whole day and woke up for the night. Story 8. How to start about it. So I and my friend live in a rented house for job purpose in another city from our hometown. We rented this 2 years ago. It was all good in the start. But after a few months we suddenly started to get agitated at smallest of things and getting ugly fights with each other, which never happened before. One night when I was not in the house, so my friend was alone in the house and he heard his mom calling his name from outside the house, and he saw, but no one was there outside. It was like 2 to 3 a.m. in the night. That matter was not discussed with me and I was unaware of such happenings in house. One day I was cooking in the kitchen and I suddenly felt a female standing behind me, a tall figure, and I suddenly saw back and there was nothing, and I continued my cooking and I heard knocking on the door. I went and there was nobody. I really felt strange but didn't think of anything paranormal at that time. After that, continuously I feel someone peeking from the window and looking at me. So for basics, we have rented a house in which on ground and first floor the family of landlord live, and on second floor we live, and there's secondary terrace outside our house and main terrace above our house. I continuously hear footsteps on secondary terrace, and when I see outside there's nobody. One afternoon I was alone in the house and I was trying to sleep and my eyes were shut. I was not able to sleep, so I opened my eyes and there was the same female entity just above my face, which I felt in kitchen, and in blink of eye it vanished and I felt it standing at the door of bedroom and staring at me. I shared it with my friend and he said he's been having similar experiences. We tried to move out of house multiple times, but literally all the situations turned against us and we couldn't move out. One time we firmly decided that we'll move out and decided one house, and landlord of that house was very sweet. We also moved there and reached an evening and were setting up the house, and suddenly the landlord came in different avatar altogether and started fighting with us in the worst way. What happened to him, but we have to instantly move out of there, and it was very late at night, so without any choice we had to come back to the old house where we were experiencing all these things. So again we failed in moving out. And after we came back the experiences have risen to 10x what we were experiencing before moving out. We don't know what to do. We're not able to move out and we're not even able to stay in the house. All our energies get drained in the house. We have constant health issues too. If anyone has any solutions what we can do, please tell me. Story 9. I never was a believer in paranormal. Till a damn near shocking encounter. After that I'm a believer. Okay, how to start. My school would have a joint exercise with other schools. Each school would send 10 boys to camp with soldiers in a forest as a training exercise to learn basic survival techniques. On the first day we set up our tents and went to sleep. In the middle of the night we heard laughing sound / girl crying sound. We all woke up, but we heard our commanding sergeant. He told us to lay low, don't move, just keep quiet till the sound stop. When we are laying down, sure as hell we can hear where the sound is coming from, and basically it is coming from above our tent. Well, I tried to brush it away thinking it's not possible, might be a monkey or something. So the next day it's as usually nothing going on, everything's going well till the sergeant started punishing anyone who smokes and started asking them to do push-ups and jump. Which I hated, so me and a couple of my buddies sneaked out. Right beside our location there's an abandoned swimming pool which had toilets rooms, and for whatever reason there a dude in front of me within 1 feet was walking in the same direction with me heading to the toilet. I can specifically say he was wearing a green t-shirt, a jeans with slippers, and long-haired dude. We identically went in the toilet together with me behind him. With just a turn he was fucking gone. I suddenly felt panicked, so I searched the whole toilet, which it's like maybe 500 sqt, because there's no window or other door to escape. My friends arrived while I was searching around the cubicle. They asked me what is going on. I told them there was a fucking dude in front of me. When I arrive he is gone. They started laughing because they thought I was joking or trying to scare them, so they brush it off, started lighting their cigarette, and they helped me light mine too because I felt something suck out my energy till I can't even light my own cig. My whole body was trembling, I can't even smoke. After that I felt something zapped me around my neck like an electric, weird feeling, don't know how to describe. I suddenly lay on the floor, like half pass out. 2 of my friends have to carry me back to the camp, because both of my leg is like paralyzed. Well, the story is kinda long, so I hope I don't bore you guys out. Story 10. Hello everyone, I have never made a type of post like this, so bear with me. Me and my roommate just moved into our new college apartment 3 weeks ago, and from the first weekend we have been having issues. The first weekend we got drunk and I was laying in bed when I saw a tall black shadow of a person walk out of my bedroom. I was too drunk to care and just assumed it was my roommate checking on me, but it wasn't. After a couple of days I kept seeing things out of the corner of my vision, but that honestly isn't new for me. But then one night my roommate messaged me and asked if I was knocking on her door. I was in bed. She said she kept hearing knocking all along her walls, and at one point it was at her door and was so loud she genuinely thought it was me. At first I just thought she was hearing the upstairs neighbors, but the next night I heard loud knocking on the wall next to my bed, and it sounded just like a person knocking. My wall is next to our living room, not another unit. The other night I thought I heard her yell something to me, so I messaged her and asked if she said something. She said no and asked if I just knocked on her door. I also said no. Right after this exchange my cats in the living room started going crazy and hissing. At this point we both thought someone had broken into our apartment. I walked into the living room and no one was there. I went into her room and she said she heard what sounded like someone in boots walking in our living room. Her door faces the living room. At this point me and her are freaking out. It sounded like someone was in our living room. Ever since that night, 2 nights ago, we have both been hearing voices, knocking, and walking. But this morning she said she saw a full-on shadow of a person walking alongside a wall. It was after that happened I decided to make this post. We have also been smelling a rotting smell that we can't identify. Any help, debunking or similar stories would be appreciated. I forgot to add that we keep experiencing random waves of extreme cold, like the type of cold that covers you in goosebumps and shiver. Sometimes at the same time, other times separately. And also I got in contact with the former tenants of our unit. They said they also had the same things happening, but it was as severe as stuff flying off shelves. We are now trying to get in contact with a priest. That's a wrap for today's spooky story. If you enjoyed this eerie tale, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to Storytime for more spine-tingling content. Hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest ghostly adventures. We want to hear from you. Share your own paranormal experiences or thoughts in the comments below. Stay curious and see you in the next video.